Hello, this is Denise from HQAA on DeviantArt. This is the second video in the tutorial series, and the first one was a two-part series that went over basic editing from raw conversion and then into Photoshop for some editing. This week we're going to go over preparing your files for web usage. So just as a little update from the last video, I did make my cursor tool a little bit bigger, so hopefully it'll be easier to see, and I can also zoom in and on some areas when we get there. So I have a new photo here and I've already done the editing to it, and I just want to show you what my process is for uploading it to the web. Now there's 1,000 different ways you can do this, so again, my way is not the only way by any means, but I'm going to show you what I do with it. So when you have a full-size image, instead of letting the web program go ahead and resize that for you, I like to have control over that just so that I know that it's not going to get pixelated or compressed in a way that I don't want it to. I also never upload full res pictures online just because of a lot of the piracy issues that are going on. And then I also personally use a watermark, but I try and make it as least invasive as possible. So the first thing I'm going to do is go up in CS5 in Photoshop here and go to the image tab here and click image size. Now this image size right now is for printing resolution. It's a pretty large file, and I want to change the resolution to 72. Now 300 is the minimum for a printing resolution. It's pretty standard if you send it off to a lab, but the web resolution is only going to show 72 pixels per inch. So I'm going to go ahead and reduce it to that. That'll help from people who are interested in taking your work without paying for print. So when they print a 72 resolution image, it's not very high quality and you don't have to worry too much about it. Then what I'm going to do is go back up to the top of the panel here and go to the pixel dimensions. Now I have my longest side equal to pixels between 700 and 800 pixels, and that's just my personal preference. You can do more or less depending if you like. I wouldn't recommend going too far below 700 because it's gonna be a really small image, and depending on the computer you're viewing it on, I found that 700 to 800 is a pretty happy medium for people with lower resolution monitors to higher resolution monitors. It works for everyone. So this width, I'm going to choose 750. If this was a vertical picture, I would choose the height as 750. I just do my longest edge, whichever one I like, and then press OK, and that resizes my picture. I'm going to bring it back to 100%. and then show you what I do in terms of making sure that the finishing touches are done. So if you were to leave this at 700 resolution, making sure you're going to print it, you would probably go ahead and make sure that you do a blanket noise reduction and some sharpening on it, just to make sure that everything is right when you send it off. And I'm going to do the same thing for the web. I do this for all of my pictures. There are about 1,000,000 different ways that you can sharpen the image in your picture, but the first thing I'm going to do is select my lasso tool and select around the subject of my picture. Now this can change depending on what type of picture you have or what the focus is, but in this small image, I'm going to go ahead, feather this. It's a small picture, remember, so feathering it only to about 30, and making sure that just this goose is surrounded, because that's the part that I really want to bring out. I'm going to go to my filter menu, and I used to do this via the sharpen menu, which makes sense since I'm trying to sharpen it, and I would choose either smart sharpen or unsharpen mask. And recently what I've liked to do, at least for web use, is actually go to the noise menu, which I know is a little bit different, and click reduce noise. This is going to bring up a panel, and it's going to give you some options for reducing noise. So the strength of your reduction, whether or not you want to preserve details or not, the color noise, and then your last option is sharpen the details. So in this one area that I have selected, I want this to be sharper image. So I'm going to go ahead and slide my cursor up. Now this depends highly on what picture you have. Some pictures are inherently more sharp than others, some need more help than others. I would recommend generally between 30 and 50%, but really look at your image and see what it's telling you. If I pull this up to 100, this looks terrible. It's way over sharpened and very wrong looking. Even at these higher numbers, it's got like this white halo around the edge. So please make sure you don't over sharpen your pictures because that's not good either. I, again, usually leave it right in the middle, so I'm going to leave this one around the 50% mark and press OK. Then I'm going to right click, select the inverse, and that's going to select everything except the goose. And this one I want a little bit of a softer feel to it. So when I do a noise reduction, I'm going to do the same thing, except I'm going to take sharpen details and put it all the way down. And this isn't going to affect how sharp the image is, it's just going to take out the noise that was in the background. And press OK. If you wanted to take this even farther, which I don't necessarily recommend for all pictures, I'll show you what it looks like. But be really careful the way you use a blur tool because it can start to look really unnatural if you go too far with it, have that really halo-y effect, and just look fake. So if you wanted to take this farther and blur out the foreground a little bit more, you can select a circle around your subject. You can also use the circle marquee if you like. Select the inverse, feather it a bit, and then what you would do is go to Filter, Blur. And I usually either use the Gaussian blur or the lens blur. I probably said that wrong, sorry about that, but you would choose one of these two and really play with this level. If you pull this all the way up, it looks awful. Again, just like the sharpening, even here, it's too much of a filter. So it's going to be really low, probably less than a 1.0 radius. I usually, for web versions, will only have it at 2 or 3 if I'm using it at all. For this picture, I'm not going to use it though. Then the last thing I do before I save it to put on the web is to bring in a font layer. I have mine saved in a different document. This is just a generic photo of mine. I can use my arrow tool, hold down that layer, and bring it over to whatever picture I need it on. So go ahead and once you have the font layer you like for your picture, save it as a PSD file, and that way it'll always be there for you to use. But if you're doing it for the first time, go ahead and delete this layer. You're going to go ahead and select your text tool over here on your text bar and type in, I've got a microphone in front of my keyboard. Apparently cannot see what I'm typing. Type in whatever font that you'd like it to say, and then you can choose different fonts or stylize it depending on what you like. So for me, I'm going to use this one. I'm going to make this a bit bigger, and that's what I'm going to use. I also like to do a little bit of finishing touches for the font itself before even adjusting the opacity. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click my font layer and go to blending options. And here you have different options for drop shadows, inner shadows, overlays, emboss. I usually choose the drop shadow and a bevel and emboss. You can decide what opacities you want them. So I can bring this down, up high. I like mine to be real nice and soft, so I'm going to put it somewhere in the middle there. And same thing for my bevel and emboss layer. I'm also going to make sure it's not too harsh of a bevel. And what that did is it just kind of rounded out the font, so it's not just harsh font on top of your picture. And furthermore, I don't like it when it's this white in your face type of font. So I'm going to come over to the right hand side of my layers panel and change the opacity all the way down pretty low. In a dark picture, you might have this as low as 6 or 7%. In a higher toned, a lot of lighter tone pictures, you might need it a little bit higher. So I would go with maybe a 15% on this particular picture, and just making sure that it blends in with the background so that if someone were to try and steal your work, people would know it was yours, but not so far obtrusive that it really takes away from the viewer who's looking at your picture and wants to see the beautiful photos that you guys have. And then the last thing I'm going to do once I have everything the way I want it is I'm going to right click over on my layers panel, flatten my image, and then save it. Make sure you save as and save it in a different location. What you just did with your resolution is you knocked it down to 72 instead of 300, which means if you save over your original, you'll never have a printing quality photo again. So make sure not to make that mistake. I usually save mine as JPEGs for uploading to the web because it's the most accepted format if I'm going to be uploading it to Flickr or Facebook or anything like that. And then I go ahead and save that copy. So that's about it for web formatting your photo. Just to go over a little bit again, once you have your edited photo, bring it over to Photoshop. Make sure you apply a noise filter if needed and a sharpen layer if needed. You can also have the option of doing a blur. Then you can go ahead and put a watermark on it. Oh, I missed to. You resize it, of course, before you do any of that. And the reason I resize it first, I'm sorry if I mentioned this already, is just to make sure that the pixels don't become compressed when you save it, so it looks as good as it can be for the web. So thank you so much. Again, this is Denise from HQAA at deviantart.com, and we'll see you next time.